gets in the way. Now, it's not saying that being wealthy is a sin. That's not the issue here. For this particular person, his wealth was in the way of his faith. His wealth had become more important to him. My alcoholism had become more important to me to something that was so important to me from an early age. The relationship I got with Dr. Broussard through that, to get to know the man that my father, who idolized my father, who wanted my father to follow in his footsteps. He used to let my father take his car out on dates when he was in college. He became a second father to me in school, and the relationship I had with him, I would trade for anything. To be at his funeral with my father and my uncle, and sitting there knowing that that man had touched all of our lives and put us all through school. I cried like a baby when he died. And I would have missed out on all of that because I was going another direction. There's a story that a mom tells about her 10-year-old son around Christmas time. He had asked his grandmother for a stamp album for Christmas. Well, Christmas came and went, and the stamp album didn't come. And so the little boy's friends come over to ask him what he got for Christmas, and he says, he starts naming all his presents, and his mom hears him, and he says, and I got a stamp album from Grandmother. She's thinking, no, you didn't. And he kept saying it over and over again. And finally she called him over, and she said, son, why do you keep telling him you got a stamp album from Grandmother? You didn't. And he looked at her puzzled, not even understanding why she would ask the question. He said, well, Mom, Grandma said so it's the same as. She didn't want to question his faith, so she let it go. Well, a month goes by. Still no word from Grandmother, and still no stamp album. So she decides she needs to say something. She goes, honey, I think Grandma may have forgotten the promise she made to you to send you that stamp album. And he said, no, she did, Mom. And then he started getting puzzled. You could see that there was some doubt in his face. And maybe his faith shaking a little bit. He said, you think it'd do any good to write her a thank you note for the stamp album? Maybe I should just thank her. And she's like, okay. So he writes a thank you letter, and man, he puts all the finishing touches on it, stamps it, puts it in the mail. He's like, good. Whistles away with the confidence that Grandma has sent him the stamp album. But not long after that, they get a return letter. And it's from Grandma. And it says, dearest Georgie, I'm sorry, but I have not forgotten my promise to you about the stamp album. I sent for it because I couldn't find one locally like the one you wanted. So I sent for one, and it came back and it still wasn't right. So I sent it back to New York, and it came back again. Many days later, it still wasn't right. So I'm sending you $3 to buy the stamp album you want there in Chicago. He reads the letter, and he looks at her and says, see, Mom? Told you. She didn't forget. And it came so clear to that mother at that point in time. While he was believing, Grandmother was working, and in due time, the faith was in the scene. God is like that. He's working all the time. We just got to be believing that He's working. We believe that He's working. The faith will come in the scene. It may not be within 2 weeks, but it's coming. The little boy's faith was a huge lesson for us. All we got to do is do the believing. God will take care of the rest. He's going to take care of it if we just have the faith to believe. That's what He's asked us to do. So, we mentioned the works. Back to the rich young ruler. That's having the faith. What we've been talking about so far is having the faith. Now, how do we live it out? Do works earn our salvation? Is it the good works that earn us our salvation? No. Look at the rich young ruler again. If it was works, man, he had it. He'd been doing everything from a young age. He was doing it day after day. Day after day. Hey, I've got it. I've been doing this all along. I've got the rules down. I'm living right. Not the point. Not the point at all. It's not that wealth is a sin. It could be anything that's standing in our way. It could be fame. It could be selfishness. It could be wealth. It's whatever's keeping us from stepping out in faith and believing that God is working on our behalf. To truly believing in Him. What have we put ahead of Him that has taken us away from His path that He's laid out for us? For the rich young ruler, that's exactly what it was. So how do we live it out? If it's not in the stacking up of good deeds. Because, let's be honest, doing the good deeds could also be your stumbling block. That could be your wealth. If you're putting, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this to earn my salvation, if that's your outlook, then there's your wealth. There's your roadblock. There's your alcoholism. There's whatever it is that's getting in your way. Because the works could be the same thing. If you're not doing them out of the love and you're doing them out of the, I'm going to earn it, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. It's got to be done for the right reasons, out of our love and our thankfulness for what he's done for us. Quick, Charles Spurgeon is a great theologian. Love to read him. Great writer. And this is something he says about it. Listen to this. Some of you good people who do nothing except go to public meetings and Bible readings and prophetic conferences and other forms of spiritual dispensation would be a good deal better Christians if you would just tuck up your sleeves for work and go and tell the gospel to dying men. You would find your spiritual health mightily restored. For very much of the sickness of Christians comes through their having nothing to do. All feeding and no working make men spiritual dyspeptics. Be idle, careless, with nothing to live for, nothing to care for. No sinners to pray for, no backsliders to lead back to the cross, no trembler to encourage, no little child to tell of a Savior, no gray-headed man to enlighten in the things of God, no object, in fact, to live for. And who wonders if you begin to groan and to murmur and to look within until you're ready to die of despair? Whoa. If we're all taking it in, if we take in the faith and we never let it out and never let it live through us, what have we done with it? This rich young ruler had done it all from a young age. He'd done everything he thought he was supposed to do. But then when it came to giving it away and living for somebody else, it became a challenge. And this isn't to throw stones at the rich young ruler. We've all been there. We've all had something gotten away from one time or another. What is it that's getting in our way? So if it's not for stacking up the deeds, how do we do it? We just move to the need. We're just supposed to move to the need, whatever that need may be. Pascal was a professor at the university in Madagascar when he was put in prison during a Marxist coup. While he was in prison, he became a Christian. Once he was released, he would still go back and talk to those who he'd met in prison or those who'd come in since and tell them about the wonderful good news of Jesus Christ. And he'd preach the gospel regularly, going back to the prison. We went back one time early in 1986, and he walked by the infirmary, and there were 50 naked bodies of prisoners just stacked up with identification tags between their toes. And he's like, what is going on here? And he went and found the nurse. He said, is there some sort of virus going around or epidemic? What is it? And she said, of sorts there is. These prisoners are dying by the dozens of malnutrition. And he's like, I got to do something. So he runs out. His church that he's in is too poor to help out. There's no units, no available aid organizations to help. So he goes back to his own house and starts cooking. He'd started a small import-export business, and with the small money he made from that, he started making food for the prisoners. From that day on, he and his wife, in their own kitchen, would start preparing meals. And they became a blessing to about 700 inmates in Madagascar. It's moving to the need. Became a Christian in prison. Not probably the place he expected. And then he just moved to the need. How are we moving to the need? What is the need around us and how are we moving to it? That's what we're called to do. Remember in the Old Testament, when Abraham takes his best servant and he says, I need you to go back to my homeland and find a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant prays and says, help me to do this for my master Abraham. So he sends his servant out. He's got camels that are thirsty. He's at the well. And who comes up but Rebecca? Like she does every day, she's coming up to the well. This is what she does. She sees a stranger that needs camels watered. She helps water. Lo and behold, you're the one. You're one of his people, one of my master Abraham's people. They go back to Laban. Laban says, this is what is right. God has brought this to us. Take Rebecca to be the bride. She was just doing what she normally does, and she moved to the need. She was just doing her daily stuff. Getting the water. Here's the servant. His camels need water. He gives him the water. He goes, she goes. She marries Isaac. They have Jacob. Jacob becomes the father of Israel. Voila.